Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
In a room heavy with legacy and silence, Princess Anne stood tall, while the king said nothing. The Windsor gathering wasn't called for ceremony. It wasn't even an official royal meeting. It was quiet, almost secretive. No press, no pomp, just the core of a fractured monarchy, seated beneath the weight of centuries-old tradition and one man's final decision. King Charles, frail and visibly aged, summoned his family for what would become a defining moment, not just in his reign, but in the very future of the crown. But when the time came to speak, he didn't. Not a word. Instead, he turned to the one person no one expected: his sister. Princess Anne stepped forward without hesitation. She had no need for titles in that moment. She was the voice of the king. The silence that followed her rise was deafening. Meghan Markle wasn't there. Her absence spoke volumes. Prince Harry, however, walked in alone, his expression unreadable but his presence unavoidable. The atmosphere was dense with history, betrayal, and something far more dangerous: expectation. William sat still, poised, but there was tension in his shoulders. Everyone in that room knew something was coming. No one knew just how much it would change them. Anne looked at each of them with the composure of a woman who had lived through it all. She didn't soften her words. She didn't dramatize them either. She simply delivered the message Charles had trusted only her to speak. It wasn't a will. It wasn't even a royal proclamation. It was something far more unsettling: the king's final wish. And it wasn't what anyone had prepared for. Anne's voice didn't shake, but the foundation of the monarchy did. She spoke of change, of a vision that looked beyond protocol and bloodlines. King Charles wasn't dividing wealth. He was dividing roles, power, symbolism, a future. William would still inherit the throne, yes, but not everything. Charles had made choices about the shape of the crown that reached beyond tradition. And as those words settled into the ears of his sons, the room shifted. William's face froze. He hadn't expected to be challenged in his inevitability. Harry, already pushed to the edge of the institution, suddenly felt pushed even further, but with a twist. He was not erased. He was acknowledged. But it was an acknowledgement that placed him on a ledge, isolated, unable to step fully back in. The monarchy, as they had known it, had just been redefined in real time, and Princess Anne, calm and unwavering, made it clear this wasn't about favoritism or sentiment. It was about survival. Charles had seen the royal machine up close, seen it crack under scandal, division, and public backlash. His final act as king wasn't to preserve old rules. It was to disrupt them, to reset the course. The reactions in the room were quiet, but they weren't calm. Shock doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes it comes with silence, with clenched jaws, with unspoken grief. And as the doors of Windsor closed behind them, it became clear to everyone: this moment wouldn't stay private. It would ripple. It would unravel truths long buried in royal corridors. And it would test everything the monarchy claimed to stand for. But to understand the weight of those words, we must go back to what shaped King Charles's decision in the first place. Before Charles became king, he watched the throne devour those before him. He was born into privilege, yes, but not comfort. His world was paved with protocol, silence, and shadows. From the very beginning, Charles knew that royalty wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility, a relentless, often unforgiving burden that no child should have to understand. But he did. Because long before the crown ever touched his head, it left marks on his heart. He watched his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, not as a maternal figure in the warm human sense, but as a monarch first. Her days were consumed by duty. Her emotions kept tightly sealed beneath layers of protocol. And Charles, even as a boy, recognized the cost. He saw the toll of leadership in her eyes. He felt it in her absence. And with every passing year, he began to understand something chilling. Love in the royal family often came second to legacy. But Charles's understanding of royal sacrifice didn't begin with his mother. It began with a scandal that echoed through the palace walls long before his birth, the abdication of Edward VIII. The moment Edward gave up the throne for love, the monarchy was thrown into crisis. His decision wasn't seen as romantic. It was seen as betrayal. It set off a domino effect that led to Charles's grandfather reluctantly wearing the crown, and eventually his mother stepping into power long before anyone had planned. Charles grew up haunted by that ripple, a constant reminder that destiny could be upended in a heartbeat, and that the crown wasn't something one claimed. It was something one was forced to carry. That legacy sat heavy on Charles's shoulders. As he came of age, so did the scandals. His personal life, his marriage, his affairs, his public image was scrutinized, dissected, weaponized. No step he took was ever truly his own. And as the world changed, Charles was forced to remain still, trapped in a role that didn't yet belong to him, but demanded every ounce of his loyalty. He wasn't just living under the shadow of a powerful queen, he was living under the weight of history of mistakes he didn't make, but had to answer for. Every move, every misstep was judged not just by the public, but by the ghost of a legacy he didn't choose. So when the time finally came for him to become king, Charles wasn't stepping into glory. He was stepping into a void. His mother had passed. The world was colder, more cynical, more fractured than ever. The crown, once a symbol of unity, now felt like a chain of expectation. Charles didn't see it as a prize. He saw it as a final test. Because after decades of waiting, after being criticized, sidelined, and shaped by forces beyond his control, he realized that the throne was never about comfort. It was about control. And the only way to reclaim some piece of himself was to reshape what that throne meant. His final wish, the one that Princess Anne had been entrusted to deliver, was not born from tradition. It was born from trauma, from watching a monarchy that punished emotion, buried truth, and demanded silence in the name of stability. Charles didn't want to repeat the mistakes that broke his parents or his own family. He didn't want the crown to become a curse for William or a memory of exclusion for Harry. He wanted to rewrite the rules, not with a pen, but with a plan, one that would acknowledge the damage while still protecting the future. And that pain only grew when time, the one thing Charles thought he had plenty of, ran out. The crown had barely settled on his head when doctors gave him the news after a lifetime of waiting, enduring scandal, public scrutiny, and the long shadow of Queen Elizabeth Charles had finally become king. But fate, as always, played cruelly with timing. Just as he took the throne, he was hit with a reality no monarch could escape: mortality. The diagnosis wasn't just a personal blow. It was a political earthquake. Cancer. A word that shattered the illusion of time, of stability, of legacy. For a man who had waited decades to lead, he now had only moments to rule. Charles had always envisioned his reign as a quiet evolution, a graceful bridge from tradition to modernity. But now, that vision was collapsing. Every assumption he once held about the future was stripped away. The throne he had waited so long to inherit no longer symbolized purpose, it symbolized pressure. A weight, not just of history, but of urgency. Because in that moment, the monarchy stopped being a symbol to uphold. It became a structure to salvage. No longer did Charles have the luxury to groom his successor over time or watch his sons gradually absorb their roles. The clock had started ticking, loudly, mercilessly, and it forced a change in him. Gone was the man shaped by ceremonial duty. What emerged was a king driven by survival instincts. Every decision now had to protect something bigger than himself. It wasn't about favoritism, it wasn't about lineage, it was about what would last when he was gone. The family, the institution, the idea of the crown, it all had to be recalibrated to outlive him. His reign became a countdown, one where every choice had to echo beyond the moment. The lines between personal and political disappeared, and legacy, once a distant concern, became his obsession. But not the kind of legacy built on statues or speeches. Charles wasn't looking to be remembered as a monarch who ruled. He wanted to be remembered as one who prepared, who saw the cracks before they widened and did something few royals ever dared, told the truth about what the monarchy had become and what it needed to survive. That's why he handed his final wish to Anne. Because she wouldn't sugarcoat it. Because she would speak it plainly, even if it hurt. And because Charles knew that soon he wouldn't be able to speak it at all. His body was already weakening. His time, once abundant, was vanishing. And so he acted not with pageantry, but with precision. Every word chosen, every move calculated. Because when the end draws near, clarity becomes your only weapon. So when he looked at his sons, he knew one would carry the future and the other, the consequences. Anne wasn't chosen by chance. She was the only one Charles trusted with the truth. She had always been the unshakable force in a family built on appearances and avoidance. While others sought approval, Anne stood in quiet defiance of pretense. That's why, when Charles could no longer speak with certainty or strength, he turned to her. Because Anne wouldn't soften the message. She wouldn't twist it for comfort. She would say exactly moment. Even the air seemed to brace itself. Charles had not erased Harry, but he had not restored him either. The final wish placed Harry in a space no royal had ever stood formally acknowledged, but deliberately excluded from the line of influence. It wasn't exile, but it wasn't reconciliation. It was purgatory, a position that said, "We see you, but we no longer follow you." Anne didn't add commentary. She didn't offer comfort. She delivered the message as Charles had instructed, with clarity, purpose, and a touch of finality. It wasn't about who deserved what. It was about who could carry what the crown had become. Not just a title, but a fractured institution gasping for relevance and unity. And Anne, with all her blunt grace, made it clear this wasn't a punishment. It was a rescue mission. The room responded not with anger, but with something heavier, disbelief. William didn't speak. His eyes stayed forward, fixed, processing the weight that had just been handed to him not by his father's hands, but by his voice through Anne. Harry, caught in the middle of past wounds and present restraint, didn't protest. He didn't have to. The silence between the brothers said everything. They weren't enemies, but they weren't allies either. And yet, as the echo of Anne's voice faded, it was clear the message had done something the crown hadn't managed in years. It cut through the noise. This was no longer about who wore the crown, but about who carried the cost of it. Charles's final wish wasn't for applause. It was for survival. But while William absorbed the weight of leadership, another royal figure was already rising in the shadows. She didn't fight for power. She earned it without asking. In a world where royalty often demands attention, Kate Middleton did the opposite. She stayed silent, steady, and strong. And that silence became her weapon. While others in the royal family chased approval or rebelled against duty, Kate remained grounded. She never asked for the spotlight, yet somehow it followed her. Not with spectacle, but with something far rarer in the royal world: trust. She became the quiet constant, the public's favorite, not because of what she said, but because of what she withstood. And in a palace consumed by drama, that kind of strength wasn't just respected, it became essential. From the very beginning, Kate was underestimated. She came from no royal lineage, held no aristocratic title, and yet, step by step, she walked deeper into the heart of the monarchy without flinching. While others stumbled under pressure, she stood taller. When scandals erupted, she didn't react, she endured. Her resilience wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was written in her composure, her discipline, her refusal to crumble under global scrutiny. And behind closed doors, the palace took notice. So did King Charles. As his health declined, as uncertainty clouded the monarchy's future, it wasn't Camilla or even William who quietly took the reins. It was Kate. Not officially, not publicly. But behind the scenes, she became the strategist, the stabilizer, the figure everyone turned to when the walls began to shake. She took on more royal duties without complaint. She represented the family with precision. She carried herself with the kind of calm that doesn't demand respect. It commands it. And slowly, without fanfare, Kate became the monarchy's most powerful silent force. the public loved her. Not for grandeur or gossip, but because she felt real, grounded, relatable. And that authenticity became her greatest asset. She reminded the people of a monarchy that could feel human again, one not shaped by scandal or entitlement, but by grace. And while the press tried to pull her into conflict, especially during the Meghan era, Kate refused to play the game. Her silence during accusations didn't expose weakness. It revealed a discipline that shook her critics. She didn't need to defend herself. Her dignity did it for her. Within the palace, her influence grew stronger. She became more than just William's wife. She became the emotional backbone of a crumbling institution. While Charles built his final plan, it was Kate who held it all together. And though she wore no crown, she carried the monarchy's future in every calculated step. Not just a consort in waiting, a queen in practice. But while Kate solidifies the monarchy's next chapter, one man remains caught in the storm, Harry. No matter how far he ran, the crown keeps pulling him back. Prince Harry didn't just walk away from the monarchy, he ran from it. Not for freedom, but for peace. Yet even oceans away, in a different country, under a different life, the weight of his bloodline never loosened its grip. He had traded palaces for privacy, titles for truth, but the price wasn't liberation, it was exile. Because no matter how many interviews he gave or how many memoirs he wrote, the crown wasn't just an institution to him. It was a wound, one that refused to heal. The world watched as Harry transformed from a beloved royal into the monarchy's loudest critic. Spare wasn't just a book, it was an explosion. A raw, unfiltered reckoning with a life lived in shadows, in silence, in control. He pulled back the curtain, revealing cracks not even the press could fabricate. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the press battles, they weren't just about telling his side. They were about reclaiming his voice in a family that had always spoken for him. But with every truth told, the distance between Harry and his royal roots grew colder, harder, irreversible. When Princess Anne delivered Charles's final wish, the message for Harry was clear: he wasn't being erased, but he wasn't being welcomed back either. He wasn't cut off. He was placed in limbo, a space where his presence could be acknowledged, but never empowered. Charles didn't offer him a path home. He offered him a seat outside the door. It wasn't cruelty. It was calculation. Because restoring Harry would risk unraveling everything the crown was trying to protect. Yet fully cutting him off would ignite a war the monarchy wasn't prepared to fight. So instead, Charles froze him emotionally, politically, publicly. But Harry isn't finished. Rumors swirl of a second memoir, one far more dangerous than the first. Not tethered to grief, not bound by heartbreak, but sharpened by distance, clarity, and timing. Insiders whisper that it's already written, waiting for the day the crown passes from Charles to William. A final blow, not masked as reconciliation, but forged in revelation. And if the first book fractured the family, the next could shatter it completely. The emotional cost of this exile runs deeper than most realize. Beneath the media frenzy is a man still torn. One who once walked behind his mother's coffin in silence. One who still searches for family in a house built on protocol. The heartbreak isn't just that he left, it's that he's still looking back, hoping, maybe foolishly, that someone will reach out. But no hand has come, and none may ever again. Because the bond that once tied him to William is beyond frayed, it's broken. The brothers haven't spoken meaningfully in years, and while Harry's public statements strike a tone of civility, the truth behind palace doors is far colder. William's silence isn't passive, it's decisive. He has drawn a line that only he can erase. And William, the future king, is no longer content to wait in silence. He waited decades to lead, and now he's ready to draw the line. Prince William, once the quiet heir walking dutifully in his father's shadow, is no longer just waiting. With the monarchy in transition and the public demanding accountability, he's preparing for his first move, one that won't be wrapped in ceremony or hidden behind palace walls. It won't be a ribbon cutting or a speech. It will be a clean break, a line drawn in bold, permanent ink. His target? the lingering ambiguity around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's royal status. And according to insiders, William is done tolerating the confusion. The plan is direct. Strip Harry and Meghan of their remaining HRH titles for good. No more loopholes, no more blurred identities, no more using royal prestige while living a private, independent life. To William, this isn't personal, it's structural. A monarchy cannot thrive on mixed messages, and after years of turmoil, media spin, and public debate, the future king knows exactly what the institution needs: clarity. This decision, however, didn't come out of nowhere. It's been brewing ever since Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties. At first, the arrangement seemed amicable, a respectful exit, a mutual understanding. But time revealed cracks. Public appearances, book deals, and repeated use of their titles reopened wounds the palace had hoped would heal. Most recently, Meghan reposted a message from the Ukrainian vice president referring to her as Her Royal Highness. That one phrase sparked a storm, reminding William just how damaging a single title could be when weaponized by those no longer serving the crown. To the public, it may seem symbolic. But inside the monarchy, it's a battle of integrity. William sees Harry's choices not as rebellion, but as betrayal. The memoir, the interviews, the quiet jabs, all of it, in his eyes, chipped away at the institution that raised them both. And while King Charles, ever the peacemaker, chose silence in the face of the storm, William has no interest in absorbing that blow. He won't let legacy be undermined by unresolved tension. He wants order, and he's prepared to enforce it. The HRH titles aren't just formalities. They carry global recognition, diplomatic weight, and public influence. When those titles are attached to individuals no longer bound by the monarchy's code, they become liabilities. And for William, now poised to lead a monarchy that's fighting for relevance, the risk is too great to ignore. Removing the titles isn't about revenge, it's about control. The monarchy can no longer afford to serve two masters: tradition and modern autonomy. William has chosen tradition, and this move will define him. It's more than just his first act as king. It's a declaration of how he intends to rule with precision, conviction, and a firm understanding of the lines that must never be crossed again. The era of blurred roles is over. The new monarchy demands loyalty, not silence, not pretense, but loyalty rooted in action, not lineage. But even as William sharpens his sword, one last hope for unity flickers quietly, his father's final message. Charles didn't leave behind riches. He left a challenge. His final wish was never meant to be a grand gesture or a royal command. It was something far more dangerous, an emotional gamble. A message meant not to crown, but to confront. Because Charles, in the final stretch of his reign, realized that the survival of the monarchy wasn't a question of protocol or bloodlines. It was a matter of healing. He had watched the royal house fracture, bleed, and fumble in the public eye. And in his quiet moments, he came to understand that power was no longer enough. What the crown needed, what it lacked, was reconciliation, or at the very least, recognition. That's why he chose Anne. Not for sentiment, but for strategy. She wasn't there to soothe egos or mend emotional wounds. She was there to hold the message steady, to deliver it without cracking under its weight. Her strength wasn't in making peace, it was in making the truth unignorable. And the truth, as Charles saw it, was this: the monarchy cannot keep pretending. The divisions must be faced, the wounds acknowledged, not hidden behind velvet and tradition, but brought into the open where they can either fester or heal. This wasn't a call for reunion. Charles never expected a teary embrace between his sons. He knew better. What he offered was something subtler and infinitely harder: a chance to stop the bleeding. A chance for William to lead not with vengeance, but with vision. To recognize that even the most painful bonds are still bonds, and that unity, though out of reach for now, must still remain on the table if the monarchy is to survive another generation. Because the monarchy's power isn't just in its titles, it's in its story. And right now, that story teeters on the edge of becoming a cautionary tale. William holds the pen now, and every move he makes will write the next chapter. Will he choose order over empathy? Justice over grace? Will he protect the institution at the cost of its humanity? These are the questions Charles wanted him to confront, not someday, but now. Because the time for waiting is gone. The future isn't approaching slowly. It's already knocking at the gates. And so, the crown doesn't rest on William's head yet, but the decision does. He must choose whether to carry forward his father's final hope for balance, or seal the divide forever. There's no middle ground left, no safe harbor between tradition and transformation. The monarchy has always been about legacy, but now, legacy means choosing not just what survives, but how. The world isn't looking for perfection anymore, it's looking for sincerity. And if William wants to lead a monarchy that means something in this century, he will need to show not just strength, but soul. The monarchy has reached its breaking point, and the world is watching to see which brother takes the final step forward or away. Drop your thoughts in the comments section, make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.